What's up, guys? Sensible Prepper School, volume 1,373,4 times 10. We're going to be talking about modern day Minutemen. Got Robbie Wheaton back with us,
back in the hot seat,
going in every direction, and great to have him with us. Robbie's a gunsmith for over 20 years. He does really awesome custom gun work, Wheaton Arms, and also does some best Glock aftermarket parts on the market. And he has the Robbie Wheaton YouTube channel, and there is a link down below in the description. And we really appreciate Robbie for being here. He's part of our prepper group on top of that. And Sarah Mack is over on the computer monitoring questions. And if you have questions at any time, you can list them in there. She's taking notes. And then when we take a break, we'll try to answer questions. So really appreciate you being here. We've got some stuff to talk about today. We're going to be talking about modern Minutemen, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and some things to be prepared. Robbie has a background in the Marine Corps. So
Boy Scouts for big kids.
That's right. Boy Scouts for big kids. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of the history, because I think it applies to even today.
Yep.
And then we're going to go into some things. One thing I do want to say up front is that Minutemen, in modern times, there have been some organizations that have taken that name. I just want to say this: we're not associating modern day Minutemen with any political affiliation or anything. Yep. This is just straight up. It's a tradition of America. It's American heritage, and and if you, of course, obviously, I don't know if they're even still teaching this in school anymore.
Probably not.
The Minuteman we learned about in school. It is the modern day symbol for the National Guard, even though it's really taken on a whole different meaning. But even today, what is this? Channel sponsors. Yes, we got to thank Exotac. And I'm going to tell you what, guys, I went down to Exotac in Winder, Georgia. I was going on a little sabbatical and went down and paid them a visit, and just a state-of-the-art facility. Absolutely beautiful. And they make some of the best fire starters on the market, bar none.
I got to tell you, when I saw some of the pictures that you posted from your little trip down there, I was a little bit envious.
Well, we'll have to go back down there.
We will, for sure.
Because it's the same facility that builds the Lionheart, Regulus, and also, which is a 9mm double action, single action pistol with a plus. It's really cool. It's a really cool system. And now they are revamping everything, new owner, and they've got the Vulcan coming out. That is a beautiful gun. So Exotac is also a part of that. So these guys really know what they're doing. They've just a beautiful facility. And so check out Exotac. You get 20% off using Sootch 20 with the link down below in the description. And guys, having a fire kit is just, it's a necessity. So what is a Minuteman? What's a Minuteman, Robbie?
I think a Minuteman is someone that takes pride in their country. They take pride in the history of their country and the values, the core values of their country, and are willing to stand up and fight for their country.
Right. Fight for what they believe in. Yep. and fight for freedom. Originally, the Minutemen were just formed out of necessity. There's been a militia. This has been since the 1600s. So by the time the Revolutionary War hit, they already had 100 years of tradition behind the Minuteman concept. And the Minutemen were actually drawn out of the militia. They were more like special forces. They were typically, no older than about 25, because they could be fast, they could be strong. They were the smarter guys out of the groups. And the thing is, they had very little time, really 30 minutes, to be able to have the call, to collect their gear, 3 days provision, their ammunition, rifles, whatever they had, and to be marching within 30 minutes. The big thing was they had a lot of threats from Indians. They had threats from the French during that time. And then also just uprisings.
Yep.
The one thing about the American, especially early America, they were a bunch of hotheads. A bunch of hotheads. If you look at all the different rebellions and the civil unrest and all the stuff that, went on during that time, because they were fiercely independent.
Well,
And
that's why the majority of them were here to begin with.
right, right. Just finding their freedom
Mm-hmm.
and their independence and starting a new life and having opportunity. Let me say this before we get started into it is, guys, we're losing our independence. We're becoming more and more dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Before, they had to do, I mean, it was self-sufficiency. They had to do what they had to do to protect their towns, protect their villages or their counties from, threats. And so they just came together and took care of business. And now we rely so heavily on, the police, which is a good thing. And we rely on our government with the military, which is not necessarily the best thing, especially in the borders of our country. But we've become very dependent,
Mm-hmm.
and in so many areas. And guys, to me, and it's one of the things that's one of my founding statements for this channel is for you to be self-reliant, more independent thinking. Being an individual.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that America was based on is you take responsibility for your own self-defense and for your own survival. And because we live in this really modern world, we've just, we've kind of just fallen to that dependence.
We have. We've almost become a product of the nanny state in the last 2-3 generations. I would say even as far back as the 50s and 60s, we were still a very fiercely independent people. And in the last 50 to 60 years, we've seen that really start to go away and become much more dependent on our government and basically dependent on everything other than ourselves.
Everything.
Not
Food,
just our government. That's right.
Healthcare, I mean, you name it, we become dependent. And so really, guys, to me, and I want to inspire you to be more independent thinking, and to be more self-reliant. Both of us have had situations to where we've had people at our house either breaking in or trying to steal something or whatever.
Yep.
And it was an hour. For me, it was 45 minutes before law enforcement came to the house. Yep. And really, when I told 911, I said, I think they may still be in the house. I was in there with my gun drawn, but and Robbie had some situations where somebody's breaking into his car.
Yep.
And it was an hour. Wasn't it?
But it's 47 minutes, almost the exact same response time.
And so, you are your first responder, whether it's whatever it is, because even the services that we have that we depend on are not necessarily right at your fingertips.
Well, they're not. They're the majority of your services, be it law enforcement, EMS, EMT, fire, are very short staffed. They're very underserved. And where we live both of us live in very big counties, very large counties, and there's not a ton of deputies. There's not a ton of EMS, EMT. There's not a ton of fire in our counties that we live in. And the response time can be extremely long for someone to get to you. And being able to protect yourself, being able to provide for yourself or your family members in an emergency situation, be it something that you need a firearm or you need a tourniquet. A lot of times you're there. You're the first one there,
right,
on that scene,
right.
And you're the one that it's going to be your responsibility to take care of yourself and take care of your family, because there's no telling how long it's going to take for someone else to get to you.
Right. And so taking responsibility for yourself, guys, is just vital in everyday life. But today we're really going to kind of focus on more of a self-defense scenario. Now, one of the big things with the militias starting out is they would train 3 to 4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
They'd get together, they'd train, they would, target practice. And a lot of these guys lived by the gun. I mean, they were hunting, they were out with their firearms. They would end up defending themselves at times, with rogue Indians or whatever. But they were very used to it. But to train as a group. And so one of the things, though, that the Minutemen did was they increased their training. They trained a lot more. And so one of the first things to consider, guys, is, are you training 3 or 4 times a year?
Right.
Or are you really training on a regular basis? By the time the Revolutionary War started, the Minutemen, during that lead up to the Revolutionary War, they were training 3 to 4 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really being proficient, knowing how to provide, knowing their firearms, knowing how to load quickly. I mean, let's face it, guys. You really need to be training with your firearms. You need to be not only just going out and shooting at targets, which is important.
It is. You know, they saw the writing on the wall several years before the Revolutionary War. You know, they saw what was happening around them. They knew what was coming. They knew that they were on a slippery slope, and they knew what the end result was going to end up being. And they increased their training to be able to meet that threat head on when it did happen.
Well, you know, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about the Civil War, a possible second Civil War.
Right.
And, you know, one of the things about the Civil War was it was 10 years in the making. There were things going on for at least 10 years before the hot war started.
Right.
And guys, if you watch what's going on in our country right now with the divide and everything else, and again, this is not even political. I'm just going to try to stay neutral with it. I'm definitely very conservative, very patriotic, and I have certain ideals. But that's not what this is about. The thing is guys, is things start to ramp up, and we're seeing it. I mean, it's in so many, the chaos, the absolute chaos, the divide, the pitting people against people,
the taxation.
Yeah.
Which was, I mean, you know, the reality of the first Civil War was what it started over was taxation, and you know, the slavery was a part of it, but the catalyst for the first Civil War was taxation on indigo.
Right.
So one of the exported goods
and states' rights.
That's right. Yep.
But
and you know, we're seeing a lot of parallels with that today.
Right.
You know, with overtaxation. Why did we end up leaving Britain to begin with? Taxation. You know, taxation, when a populace becomes overtaxed to the point that they can't provide for themselves anymore, or can't even afford the goods that they would normally purchase, this is kind of the end result.
Well, you know, we're looking at a huge debt ceiling that's going through. I mean, they're just opening it up. They're dumping tons of money into Ukraine. I mean, there's a lot more coming on that issue. But the big thing is, as far as militia groups, you know, and that's become a bad word, you know, militia. Oh, you're part of a militia. I'm not part of a militia.
Domestic terrorist.
Yeah. I mean, it's on a domestic terrorist list. And, you know, that's something that we're not really trying to encourage necessarily. If that's your choice, that's your choice. It's part of the American heritage. It's part of the American experience, honestly. But Minutemen were ready to go at a moment's notice. They had their provisions, their gear, everything ready, which we're going to kind of go into a modern day scenario in a minute. But the training is a very important part. One thing that I like to do is go to training, go somewhere that people are showing you. One of the things about going to the range. Now, if you go with friends, sometimes you can, you know, you have some accountability. I mean, Robbie and I have done a lot of that over the years. And Robbie's done a lot of training on his own. But, you know, going through, and when somebody else watches you train, it helps you to eliminate some things that you don't see in yourself.
And that's right.
You know, because you may be holding a gun, you may be doing a certain way.
Well, you know, one of the big things that I've always recommended for people to do, if you don't have a buddy that's much, much more experienced than you to go to the range with you, videotape yourself while you're shooting. Go back and watch the videotape, and you'll be able to visually see things that you're doing incorrect.
We ought to do that.
maybe we'll try that one day.
We might try to video us shooting, but
it really helps. It really helps to identify areas of deficiency within your training and be able to fix it quickly and easily. It's hard for someone to tell you that you're doing something wrong when it feels like you're doing it right. You can't visualize it. When you can go back on film and see yourself doing something wrong, it's much easier for you to visualize it and fix it.
And I'll tell you one way that you can really get critiqued is to make a video of you shooting and put it on YouTube. What are you doing? Ain't the way you shoot, ain't the way you hold that. So, you know, but training is vital. And understanding your firearm, that really gave the Minutemen an edge when it did come to battle against the British and even the French and the Indians and all the different conflicts they had before. They were battle tested. They were battle proven. So they had been out there, they had done the work, and they had been called upon a number of times. So again, it was a long tradition. So being ready at a moment's notice. Now, one thing that was kind of funny, I thought, was too, is the Minutemen what they would do is the bottom ranks would elect who led the group. And that's one thing that's kind of, to me, really gave them advantage as well, because they saw natural leadership, the right leader, to come into place and to take them to where they need to go. Because you need a leader. You need somebody that can help at least direct things. And so, but the downside to the Minutemen was that they had no central leadership. There was an instance where they were fighting against the British, and they got to a certain point and they defeated the British. They ran them out. Well, the British were on retreat, and if they would have just continued, they would have taken that whole group out. But instead, they stopped and they went back home because they were more concerned about their home. And guys, honestly, this Minutemen kind of mentality is more on the defensive type situation.
Right.
It's being ready. A lot of us are Minutemen when it comes to home defense. We're ready. We've got our firearm. We've got maybe our flashlight. We may have a few things that we're ready in case. One thing I do want to mention, and this really kind of very much parallels, is years ago, I did a video called the Intruder Defense Bag. And I don't know, I had this bag and I put my firearm with it. I put a flashlight. I put some a first aid kit in there. I just had some basics that if anybody ever broke into the house, I wanted, if I had to go, I wanted my stuff together.
A couple of hand grenades.
Yeah, some claymores. But
right.
I had my stuff together, and so I put the video out, and I had it in a place where it was right there near the bed. There was a guy that about 2 weeks later sent me a message, and this is when I could really kind of keep up with messages. Unfortunately, those days are gone. But he sent me a message, and he goes, "I just want to thank you for putting out that video." He said, beforehand, he goes, "I kept my guns in my safe, unloaded." And he said, when I watched that video, I thought, I need to do that, because if something ever happens, I'm going to be in trouble. So he put together his Intruder Defense Bag. Within a week, they had a home invasion. They had 2 guys bust down the front door. They were armed to the teeth. He said, the police have just left. He goes, I had to defend myself with my family. He goes, if I hadn't done that, he goes, we may be dead right now. And, it really sent cold chills. Listen, if you're so concerned about safety, and I know if you have kids, small kids, it's definitely a concern. It's something you need to take responsibility for. On the other hand, you need to have something to where you can get to it. And a lot of times the little lock boxes, with the different, you can set those aside, but have something quick access if you need it, because you may not have time to get, especially all worked up and you're sitting there fiddling. Make sure that you have something that you can readily get to. That's part of the Minuteman mentality.
I've used one of those. I've got one of those little lock boxes in my nightstand, and I've used it for almost 20 years now.
Wow.
And I think I've only replaced the batteries in it twice, but it doesn't pull a whole lot of power. They last forever. And, your firearm's secured, but you can access it really quickly when you need it.
Right.
So, and I've accessed it really quickly when I needed it several times.
Yeah.
So.
And there are some great options out there. So definitely consider that. That is your first line of defense. And that should be where you're really ready to go. And it's just like with me and my parents. My dad called me at 3 a.m. Now he's in his 80s. Called me at 3 a.m. He said, somebody was beating on the door. So I jump up, I have my stuff together. So I grabbed it. I went out. I took my AR that time because, he lives next door to me, he and my mom, and got over there and, just check things out. And the one thing is I knew the area. I knew I'd been all over my property. So I was very familiar with it, doing flashlight reviews in the middle of the night, going out and doing stuff. And so I really knew where all the hidden points were. And so I really checked things out. I'm not really even sure what happened. I think Dad may have been dreaming, but it ended up being an okay thing. But be ready, have your stuff prepared, because the last thing you want to do is be searching around when something really is going on and not be able to have your gear. Okay, we're gonna go to another point, and then we're gonna go to some questions. So I'm gonna give Sarah Mack a little heads up. One thing about the Minutemen too is they were well versed in irregular warfare. So the British would line up, you know, and
Yep.
the colonials would line up. And they just shoot each other.
It's at that point in time, it was very traditional warfare. You know,
Right.
the field of battle
Right.
is what it was referred to, where they would line up and their ranks, they would shoot. Next, they would kneel down, they'd load. The line behind them would shoot, and basically, whoever killed more people first won.
Right.
So
you don't necessarily have to have military training to be a Minuteman. You know, it comes down to you training. And one of the funny things is in today's world, really, especially with the gun community, is there is a lot of training, and people typically are more trained than law enforcement. You do more shooting than a lot of law enforcement, and so, you know, it's just that we have really good training if you access that training.
You know, probably better training opportunities are available right now than they've ever been in this country. You have a lot of really experienced warfighters that have retired or got out of the military and started training organizations to be able to bring training to civilians, a really high level training.
Right.
That, you know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago would be inaccessible to the vast majority of people that are out there.
Right.
And you can go almost anywhere in any state and be able to get that training now from really, really experienced, high level, highly trained individuals.
And, you know, it's expensive. I mean, you know, like some of the courses we've taken, it's 1,000 rounds. That alone was expensive. And then you pay for the class. And I went up to Yeager's last year before he passed away, and which they're still doing training, by the way. They're doing a great job. But
that's tactical response.
Tactical response. Went up there for 5 days. And I'm going to tell you what, I left there a different person. I left there a totally different person. So training is just so vital. It's so important. Okay, if we have some questions, we'll go to them, and then we'll come back.
The Parallel Sound asks, question, what do you think about the U.S. senators being given satellite radios this week in case USA gets an EMP attack and we have full-scale power outage? Why isn't this all over the headlines?
Yeah, I don't know. And they have been moving a lot of explosives in that the same situation. I heard that. But, you know, who knows? I mean, with the way things go right now, it's so topsy-turvy. But I have heard that, and I have heard that they were moving pretty large amounts of munitions back and forth. It was kind of unprecedented. And, you know, but the one thing is, though, guys, and just from experience, my own experience, is that a lot of times there's a lot of stuff out there that you read could possibly even be true. But before long, you know, then you get to where you don't believe anything. And so what I like to do is as far as that kind of stuff, intelligence is what that is, and what's going on, and to keep my ear to the ground. But, you know, you just don't know in today's world. But yeah, I really don't know, but it just sounds like some things are moving.
Ryan Mathena asked, hey guys, do y'all leave your pistol and AR mags loaded all times, or do you change them out every so often? Thanks. God bless.
So I download my magazines by about 3 rounds. I don't fully compress the springs in any of my magazines from a pistol or my rifle. I found that I get a lot longer spring life if I download them by 2 or 3 rounds. And but yes, I do leave all of my magazines that I use on a regular basis for defensive firearms always stay loaded. And I shoot with those magazines pretty regularly just to test them, make sure that they still function properly. If I run across one that I have even one failure with, that magazine gets tossed and gets replaced with a new one.
I find that PMags are some of the best to keep loaded. The AR-15 mags, they can stay loaded for a long time, whereas a lot of other magazines have a lot of issues if they stay loaded.
With the exception of the 40-round mag. I've got some of the 40 rounders that, you know, I downloaded them by a few rounds and I've had issues with them.
Yeah, I guess that's getting that spring out there. Now, typically with my handgun, what I like to do is my self-defense handgun is I don't just switch it out. We go to the range and shoot them out, and then I replace them. And so it's really good to take that, especially that gun that's your go-to gun, and to keep it really in top notch. But
you know, even my ammunition, I rotate out my defensive ammunition pretty regularly. You know, like probably once every 6 months or so, I rotate it out and replace it with fresh ammunition, just because from chambering around, unchambering around, rechambering rounds, doing that over and over again, you can actually unseat the projectile and shove it back into the case,
Right.
which can cause an overpressure issue. You can actually blow your gun up.
Right.
So I change out my defensive ammunition pretty regularly.
Right.
Minnesota Country Girl asks, question, I want to learn ham radio. Can you recommend a radio for beginners?
Well, what I would recommend, because ham radio is a pretty complicated process, is something that's definitely doable, and it's a very important thing to have. But get involved. They're typically local ham clubs around, and I know our local Red Cross, they have ham radio classes, and I've got a real good friend of mine that is huge in ham. I mean, he can set up repeaters, he can do about anything, and he will not buy the inexpensive, cheap radios. He's just like, nope, nope, nope. He likes the really nicer radios. A lot of people have bought the Baofengs or the Wushan Chinese radios, and they love them. I've got some. They're fine. But to know the full capability. So I don't want to recommend a certain brand. I think getting around people that are doing ham, because you have to take classes to get your license and find out really what's the best setup. And they'll be able to help you. And everybody has different opinions. But I think that is one of the best ways to tailor what you're wanting to do, because you have your portable, you have your vehicle, you have your your home,
base station.
You can do a ham shack, and you have your antennas running through the roof. I mean, the sky's the limit when it comes to that. So I would highly recommend getting involved with some ham operators and find out what they're doing, so you can get really what you need. So that's my recommendation. One more, and then we'll go to question. Go back.
Counselor Chip says, our only place to do actual training closed. There is no range near within 90 miles. Where can we do stacking up, clearing, transitioning, etc.?
Well, it's definitely according to the club or the range. And Chip, in Texas, that's kind of sad, because I know Chip, but that's kind of sad in Texas. You don't have a place to train. But it's like there are ranges here. You can't draw from your holster, and a lot of them, and a lot of that's liability stuff. I mean, we're very fortunate, because we are members of a club that, we can do a lot of different things. But just have to look and find what's available in your area.
My recommendation would be do it less lethal. Practice a lot of that stuff with airsoft. So you can get a lot of very real reality-based scenarios that you can work on and train on with airsoft that translate directly over.
Yeah, that Mantis X training systems, the laser ammo training systems. There are a lot of options out there. It gets you a lot of weapons manipulation stuff going on. And it's funny, because in Asia, and I think it's in Japan in particular, that a lot of these guys are training with airsoft, and then they go and compete, and some of them have never fired a live firearms and then win them.
The Steel Challenge has been won several times by Japanese competitors that train all year with airsoft and come over here for 2 weeks before the match and borrow a handgun, train with that handgun, and have won the Steel Challenge. Doing exactly that.
So the weapons manipulation, the handling of the firearm, the way, the accuracy, those kind of things, all that is huge. And then just standard dry firing is good. So if you can't find a range that you can do that with, you can there are other options out there. Okay, let's go on to our list. One thing too, and this is the gear. And with the Minutemen, it was a 3-day provisions. So you needed to make sure you had enough food, water, your ammunition, you had those things that was for 3 days. Now, what we're going to get into next is the actual modern day. If you're going to be a modern day Minuteman, these are some things that you need to consider. And we're just going to go down some thoughts. Of course, obviously, the first thing is your firearm.
Yep. Firearm, ammunition.
You getting on the list. Firearms.
Or firearms. Yes.
Don't go down the list yet.
Sorry.
We got a list.
I jumped ahead.
Okay, firearms. What would you recommend to have is a Minuteman option?
Your your modern day rifle, the AR-15, hands down. It's lightweight, easy to carry lots of ammunition, magazines that hold more than one round, which is definitely an advantage over the original militiaman.
Yeah,
the
where they
original
load
Minutemen.
them through the bore.
Yep. So that, and then my Glock 19, and then extra magazines and ammunition for that one as well.
Right. Now, modern day rifle, of course, obviously the AK-47 is definitely an option. If you want to go heavier, go to the M1A or the M14 or
the AR-10s.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of different options. Find out what's best for you. I mean, personally, Robbie and I are on this together. We both have AR-15s. We have the setups. A lot of times with ARs or AKs, there's a lot of different options that we're going to get into in a second. But one thing that I do love about the AR is if I want to put an optic on it, it's just easier to do. It's just easier. But I love my AKs as well. But, one thing that I think is another advantage of well, there's two more. One of the big things about an AR is I would recommend you build an AR.
Yeah.
Build an AR. You buy an AR, buy a standard factory made BCM AR or whatever company you want to go with. But I would also recommend you building an AR because it teaches you all the intricacies of the parts.
You really learn a lot about how the rifle functions or fails by building one. You learn the failure points. You learn the areas that are weaker with that design, the areas that wear out, your preventative maintenance schedule, what extra parts you need to have on hand, and you learn a lot of that from building one and shooting it.
Right. Yep. And we keep extra parts, so if something goes wrong, we can fix it.
That's right.
And there's not really anything on the AR-15 that you can't fix, or at least replace.
But it's like there's a lot of companies that make ARs now with piston assemblies. The short throw or long throw pistons, and I think they work great. I've been a huge fan of them for a long time. I don't have a piston driven rifle as a defensive rifle, simply because if the piston goes down on it and they fail, I've seen a lot of the companies that are out there, the pistons fail on them. But if the piston on your AR fails, it's not something that you can replace easily. Right. It's not something you can find replacement parts for easily. So I run a traditional gas impingement with a gas tube on it, and know that there's a PM schedule for it, that it wears out and I have to replace it, but gas tubes are easy to find. And, in a bad situation, you can even fabricate your own gas tube, with some flaring tools and stainless steel tubing.
Wow. So, yeah. But that's the one thing, that's to me the biggest advantage of the AR is that you can replace parts in the field if you need.
That's right.
And it doesn't really take super specialized tools to do it.
No, you can do pretty much anything with that rifle, short of replacing a barrel with a punch and a couple of Allen wrenches.
Yeah, and all you need for the barrel is really just a torque wrench and being able to, with the fixture just to be able to do it. So
action wrench to hold the receiver, and then a wrench to break the barrel nut loose.
Yeah. Yep. So that's one thing, and it's just one of our deals. But having a sidearm is actually very important as well, because for close-in self-defense. It's easier to conceal.
That's right.
I mean, there's just a lot of possibilities with a handgun. So having your go-to rifle accessible, but also having it fully maintained,
right?
Having it ready, having some cleaning supplies to keep it clean. To me, I'm notorious, and I know you are too, about sometimes just shooting and just not cleaning it, because they do function for a long time.
They do. Yep.
I put 6,000 rounds through an AR-15 one time without any cleaning.
Yeah.
Just to see how long it would go. And then finally it set up for a little bit. And when I pulled the bolt back, it went. So then I said, okay, it's time to clean it.
I know right around the 7,000 round mark, they get so much carbon buildup in it that the firing pin will start sticking. And you can have a out of battery discharge with it around 7,000 rounds.
But just make sure that your go-to firearms, whether it's your concealed carry or your go-to rifle, is really clean. Now, the thing is, some people would go with more of a longer range option, with a bolt gun or something that would get a lot more distance.
And that goes back to the Minuteman mentality. There were different Minutemen that had different skills, and if that's in your skill set and in your wheelhouse, yes, a long gun for a long range option may definitely be your go-to, and the AR would be your secondary.
Right.
that
And
you
then a
would fall back on.
shotgun.
Yep.
Shotgun can also be used, especially it's devastating close up. And, obviously law enforcement depends heavily a lot of times on shotguns for door breaching and other things. So, it's definitely one of those options, but it doesn't give you the range. Now, next is load bearing. And, one thing is you got your rifle, you got your magazines, where you're going to shove them in your pockets, have some kind of system to be able to carry extra magazines that you can get to.
Well, that's the big thing, is not just carrying extra magazines, because I can take my Everly stock backpack and stuff it slam full with enough gear that I can barely carry it. The thing is, you have to be able to access it. If you have to use your rifle, one magazine may not be enough.
Right.
So you need to be able to access magazines to reload your rifle or your sidearm very quickly.
Right. And whether that's a battle belt with pouches or a vest with pouches or a plate carrier where you can put pouches on it, or a satchel where you have extra magazines in there, something to be able to carry your magazines. The satchel to me would be the least desirable, but if that's what you have, it's what you have.
Actually, the belt would be the least desirable for me.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. You've got your battle belt that's got all your magazines and your handgun and different pouches and stuff all around it. And you put it on, you clip it on, and you wear it all day, 12, 14 hours a day. That belt with all of that ammunition and all of that weight on it gets really heavy on your hips, and it becomes uncomfortable over a period of time. I prefer either a load-bearing vest or a plate carrier with my magazine pouches on that, just because it's you've got the weight on your shoulders and around your waist. It's much easier to carry. It's less fatiguing.
That's true.
And then a big pouch on my side would be my second choice for the same reason. I could carry it across my shoulder. And if, I got tired on this side, I can switch it around and roll it over to the other side and carry it on the other side.
Right.
And you get less fatigue from that. Now, a good battle belt is still something that you absolutely should have, because you have to have a way to carry your handgun and handgun ammunition. But with your battle belt, try and limit the amount of weight that you put on it, because it helps to minimize fatigue.
Right. And battle belts are really great for competitive shooters and things like that. So, they do have their place. It's just that if you're going any kind of extended distance. But having some kind of load bearing system is important. Now, one thing I actually skipped were magazines. Having extra magazines, minimum of 6 rifle magazines.
I've got my defensive magazines that stay loaded, stay in my vest, but I have a bunch of brand new magazines still in the pouch that if I have to swap out a magazine, I've got a supply of extra magazines that it's easy for me to rotate in.
Right. And sometimes people go cheap with magazines. Listen, they're so inexpensive. Even Magpul magazines, are fairly inexpensive.
They are. I've seen them lately for $10 or less a piece.
Yes.
And you can't buy C products or aluminum magazines or steel magazines anywhere near that price.
Well, and then when you go with your AK-47, magazine, definitely they're more expensive. The Magpul magazines are less expensive, and they're less heavy, but definitely AK mags typically tend to be more expensive. Then you get into your M1As and things like that. That starts to get more and more.
Right.
Your FN, FAL, your G3 HK. Okay, so having a good supply of magazines, to me, bare minimum is 6 magazines, but I would definitely have way more than that. Yeah, for each firearm, including your handgun. Okay, 3 days provisions. So you got 3 days. You got, and really that goes along with kind of your bug out bag. It's your 72-hour bag. Yep. You've got your food and your provisions.
That's
in
right.
there.
Because Daddy got to eat.
Yeah, Daddy got to eat. Daddy does got to eat. But some of those shows like Survivor and all that, where they're out there, living on the land and doing whatever, and they lose like a tremendous amount of weight because, even that way. But making sure you have your provisions with a pack, and this again goes in with bug out. It goes together with a get home bag, whatever. And then having, a way to filter your water, because back in the day, they didn't really have to filter water because water streams were more clear and clean. But then they had to, we've got to have water filter. That creek can look absolutely incredibly clear. and it can have cryptosporidium and giardia and those kind of things that'll make you super sick
or kill you.
Yeah, may even kill you.
Yep.
So making sure that you have a way to filter out your water. Okay, let's go to, just because we need to, let's go to a few questions. I'm going to throw Sarah Mack under the bus here.
Well, one of the big things with your provisions, especially with food, you don't want to be doing the things that a Minuteman does and spending the majority of your time searching for food, foraging for food. There may come a point in time where you have to forage, but for the 3 days, you should have enough food to be able to sustain you for 3 days without having to do any kind of foraging or anything.
Right, and to make it as simple.
Right, keep you sharp and keep you on point and on task.
Okay, what you got?
FB Drivers Training Network asks, question for Robbie. What's the risk is there to shoot a 7.62 NATO round from a 1942 in a .308 Winchester? A friend of mine is selling 1,390 rounds for $160. That's why I'm asking.
Wow.
Yeah, you shouldn't have any issue with it at all. 7.62 and .308 pressure-wise are very, very similar to one another. So you should be able to shoot 7.62 and a .308 with no problem.
That's a deal.
Yep, that is a deal.
United Hearts America asks, what is a good source of local maps for evac and planning routes?
Well, the U.S. Forest Service, there are companies. In fact, I ordered topographical maps for my area, and they come in sections, and I don't really remember the name. I think you can kind of look them up, topographical maps, and they'll have certain areas that you can go to. And I got them in rolls, and they roll out. They're pretty large. But one thing that I highly recommend, and I've been recommending this for a long time, are just your standard road maps of your area.
Yep. Get a national road atlas.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, we don't read maps that much, but guys, if GPS goes down or something, you need to have maps. I should have, and I'm glad you asked that question, because that is something that you should also consider in your Minuteman bag, at least a map of the general area.
That's right.
Because we've lost the art of reading maps, and so it's really important to have those maps. A lot of times, truck stops or service centers that have trucks, that have trucks come in, they typically have more maps than anybody else, but you can order them.
Yeah, your Department of Natural Resources a lot of times will have maps of all of the state land, and they're great little topo maps, and most of the time they're free.
Right.
So DNR is a good place to look for them.
Welcome centers are a great place.
Welcome centers
if you live near a state line.
And worst case, even if they don't have a map that you can take with you, they'll have a big one on the wall that you can take pictures of.
Right.
So, you've at least got something.
Right.
Make sure if you do that, take a picture of the little, I just went brain dead.
The key scale.
The key. Take a picture of the key at the bottom so you know what the symbols mean and what the distances are.
Right.
John G. asks, is there a minimum amount of defensive ammo versus a minimum amount of training ammo?
Well, the thing is, like for me, the AR-15, it's one and the same. Unless it's something specialized that I don't want it to penetrate too far, if I want to use some different ammunition. But my standard, whatever grain that I'm going to use, 62 grain, 55 grain in the AR, or, my 9mm ammunition, which really you really need a different set of self-defense ammunition than just shooting up ball.
Right.
Ball is not as effective as home defense ammunition or self-defense ammunition.
Yeah, I mean, for a Minuteman, 300 rounds of each caliber should be your loadout for your ammunition. So you should have at least 300 rounds of defensive ammunition for your handgun and for your rifle.
But, as far as training ammunition, as much as you can possibly have, because you need to be doing a lot of training.
Josh Grigsby asks, do you recommend a type of brand for pistol holsters?
It's according to what you like, and it's according to what you're doing with it.
Yeah.
I know, Rob, you're a big Safari Land guy for competitive.
I've loved Safari Land for a long, long time. But yeah, like you were saying, it really depends on what you're looking for. You've got your level 1 stuff, which has no active retention. Then you've got your level 2s and level 3s and level 4s, which have both active and passive retention, multiple levers and stuff. So it really depends on how secure you want the handgun in the holster, how difficult you want to make it for someone else if you're hands-on with someone and they're trying to take your firearm out of your holster. But Safariland makes a wide variety of holsters that cover, from A to Z, basically, with handguns.
Now, I'm a big fan. If you like Kydex, I'm a big fan of G-code holsters. They are some of the best. They're injection molded. They are some of the best quality, and with their RTI system, they can do all kind of lockups. They've got all kind of retentions. They've got even concealed carry holsters, and then for me, I like leather holsters, and so one of my favorites is John Jackson Leatherworks. I love his custom holsters, but one that's just standard is Craft holsters, and I've gotten to where I carry leather. I know that's sacrilege to a lot of people, but it's so comfortable, and I take it at 4 o'clock. But if you're going appendix, you need to put that together. But I mean, there's so many different holster companies out there, Vetter holsters, just tons of them. So, it's really a matter of personal choice and what you're doing with it.
Right. And how it fits and how it carries. And, the thing is with holsters, there may be one that I love that you absolutely hate, so holsters are a very personal thing, something that you should really, if you can, go to a store, actually try them on your belt, see how they fit, see how they feel. And before you actually go out and buy one.
And even then, we still have boxes of holsters.
We do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we're gonna come back if we have enough time, but we want to make sure that we finish out with our list. We ended with 3 days of provisions. The next is clothes that are they're hard use clothes. The thing is, fatigues are great, that kind of stuff, because they've been tested and then used out there. But a good sturdy set of pants, of shirts, things like that are subdued. You don't necessarily want it to make it look like a uniform.
Right.
There are some laws about that. If you're trying to, look like a military unit, they kind of start frowning on that. But to wear camouflage is not illegal. So, you can choose your but make sure it's good hard use.
And I like stuff that's made out of a ripstop material. So if you do get a tear in it, it doesn't continue to rip. I like pants that have knee pads built into them, just because if you're having to crawl around, it gives you a little bit of padding and support on your knees. But yeah, finding good clothes, really great clothes that will last you and stand up to a lot of hard use is something everybody needs for sure.
And following right along with that are boots. Having a good pair of boots that you can count on, and good quality boots, and break them in beforehand.
Yes.
That's one thing. In fact, I think years ago I bought some Danner boots, and I went on a hike, and man, I broke them in, but they broke me in. But yeah, make sure that you go ahead and get your boots seasoned and get them, broke in. And a big one is socks.
Yes. I'm a huge proponent of extra socks. You have to keep your feet dry. If your feet get wet, whether it's from sweat or moisture or water or whatever, you're going to end up with blisters really quickly, and blisters will take you out of the fight.
Right.
So
foot jungle rot.
That's right. Keep lots of socks. If you're having to walk a lot, change them regularly.
Yeah. And then lights. Light is your number one security tool. You need to have good flashlights, weapons lights. All that gives you an advantage. When you think about it, if you don't have light, but one person does, they have superpowers.
Yep.
So, having light, and a lot of times these things, happen in the dark. So having a good flashlight, having light discipline, making sure you don't just cut on your light. If you do, just momentarily.
Well, and with the popularity of night vision now and the prices of night vision really coming
on the list.
I'm staying with lights.
Go ahead. I'm just playing.
Look at IR lights. A light that will do both white light as well as IR light, to be able to go with the thing that we're going to talk about later that I can't mention.
Oh, you can. Go ahead. We don't have to go down the list. We just got 5 minutes.
But a good IR light that gives you a long throw to go with night vision is, and like I was saying, with the cost coming down on night vision so much, it's almost, you should have it.
Yeah,
you should have it.
Yeah, night vision, the quality, now for me and Robbie, we go with the PVS 14s or the thermal. We have thermal scopes and all that stuff. And a lot of that's for hunting. A lot of that's just for regular whatever. And it's expensive. And that's the reason why I put it at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that you should strive for, is to have some kind of capability to see at night. Took a class with TNVC, their night fighter class, with combat training with night vision. And man, it was like my buddy Bill, who ran the class. He said, if you have night vision, you have superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's a force multiplier. It gives you a lot of advantages. Night vision is something that obviously the U.S. military uses extensively, and law enforcement.
Yeah.
And so there's some good reasons to have night vision.
I tell you, I've been working with a little clip-on night vision that goes in front of your, or it goes on the back of your ocular on your regular scope. And I've been working with that for about the last 5 months, and it uses IR light to illuminate the area. But I've been really, really impressed with it. It's one little lever, you throw it, you can take it off and use it as a handheld monocular, stick it back on your rifle, throw one little lever, and it locks it on, and you've got a night vision scope.
Wow.
And no zero shift taking it on and off or anything.
Right.
And, with a really good IR light, it really extends the capability of it, or you can identify or shoot out to 300, 400, 500 yards with this little clip on, and it's cheap.
And you're going to leave it a mystery for everybody?
I am. Reviews coming up on my video on my channel.
Good deal. Okay, lights and night vision, definitely. Being able to see in the dark. I mean, that's great. Having some survival kits, some survival supplies.
Yes.
Your paracord. Your fire starters. Fire starters are big. Exotac, 20% off.
Yep.
That's fire starting kits. Just some things that you may need to do some repairs, things like that. So having just your basic survival kit in with your stuff,
and your med kit.
Yeah, your medical kit, trauma kit.
Must have.
And, I didn't even put that on the list.
I know, that's okay. I got you.
Thank you, Rob.
You're right.
I'm usually such a good guy. Trauma kits, definitely, with tourniquets, with chest seals. Get some training with medical and trauma.
It's the thing with medical is it's not a black art.
Right.
It's not. There's very basic, very simple principles that you follow. You want the air to come out, you want the blood to stay in. I mean, it's really pretty simple. I mean,
right.
It really, when it comes down to it, it's really pretty simple as far as emergency medicine.
But what you don't know, you don't know.
That's right.
And it's not really, I'm telling you guys, even if you just go to the Red Cross and take some CPR classes, or maybe you can get a stop the bleed class, things like that, they are worth their weight in gold. Because it may not be any kind of Minuteman situation. Right. It may be your kid or something happened to him,
or a bike wreck, or
where you need that. And then one that, and I had night vision and binoculars at the end. Binoculars, a lot of times we don't really think about binoculars unless we're hunting or doing something, and it really identifies what's going on. From our house down to my shooting range, it's about 200 yards. And somebody could be down there doing something, and I'm looking, I can't necessarily really clearly see what they're doing.
I tell you, binoculars is something that I have added to my everyday carry bag. I've got a small pair of binoculars in my everyday carry bag. Because I've found myself over the last few years, getting old, blind, can't see. And, I've found myself wanting to see something, wanting to know what something is, and not having a pair of binoculars with me.
Right.
So I've added a pair to my bag.
Right. That's a smart way. I've been using binoculars for checking things out. If there's something going on at the road I can't really see, and I'm a little bit like, what is that? I can check that out. But being able to identify, because the last thing you want to do is, if for some reason you're in a situation where you possibly are taking shots at somebody, you can identify because it may be a friend.
Yep.
So that is the list. How much more time do we have, sis? Because I don't want to. Okay, well, we're going to have to wrap it up. Guys, thanks so much for the great questions. And sorry we couldn't get to more. You just want to get through this list. But guys, be a Minuteman. Be ready. And some of you are ready for what? Ready for life. Ready for whatever faces you. And I'm not, here to give you a scenario of this or that. Being a Minuteman comes in handy in so many different ways. And with a lot of the civil unrest that we dealt with a couple of years ago, and some of the things that are going on now, just a lot of stuff going on. Get yourself prepared to be ready to face whatever. And that's the big message here. Again, this isn't a political thing. It's just everyone has the right to live.
That's right.
Unless they've done something heinous. But everyone has the right for life, for self-defense. It's a basic human right, and you need to be prepared for it. And the last thing you want to do, because these situations don't just come up all the time,
Right.
And a situation can happen and you're not prepared. And really, it doesn't take that much to kind of just be prepared. So we really appreciate Robbie Wheaton for being here today, and always a pleasure having him around. And we'll sit here for another while and gab for a little bit.
Yes, we will.
And we would include you, but Sarah Mack's going to leave now. But I really appreciate Sarah Mack for taking care of the questions and just bringing that to us. And guys, just again, be prepared. Be prepared in your home. Be prepared for self-defense. Just be prepared with the basic elements of survival. Because we do live in a very comfortable world, and that can change in a heartbeat.
Yes, it can.
And again, check out Wheaton Arms. Check out Robbie Wheaton's YouTube channel, link down below in the description, especially if you want to find out about that night vision monocular, which I'm going to see if I can pull it out of him after we get off here. And just hang in there, guys, because we live in the greatest country in the world, and we've got to keep it that way. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.